Hello and welcome to Blah Blah Comics, Blah Blah Curse Words. I'm Derek.
I'm Colby.
I have the power! And we talk comics sometimes. And guys, we have the craziest episode for you today.
Legit crazy, probably.
Not even, I mean, some kind of comics tie-in. This is honestly something we didn't even know we were doing until very, very recently. Colby, I honestly had no idea up until last week what a big Masters of the Universe fan you are.
Yeah, I mean, it's like not even a Fairweather big one. I guess Fairweather big fan, but it's always around me. And it's been around me for a while now, so I've just absorbed a lot of knowledge and absorbed an appreciation of it over the years.
Do you want to talk a little bit about how you got into He-Man?
Let's see. Well, I guess I'm gonna edit some of this out because I gotta think for a second. Let's see, where was it? Okay, so back in 2002, they relaunched with the updated show. Which was awesome. Yeah, I can't remember how old I was, but I was like around the age, a little older than the market, but still around that age, and so I kind of had some of the figures. It was also when I was like growing out of figures and stuff before I started collecting them, and when it wasn't cool at the time to have them. So I was kind of in between there, and I saw some of the show and saw the figures, and always liked the design of certain characters and liked the show and liked certain characters a lot. But kind of nothing really came of that. And then somehow, about 10 years later, me and Nathan were working on New Crescent Road's album, and he kind of retroactively was raised on He-Man. Very weird, interesting life story, but essentially he grew up reading the old He-Man comics that came with the figures from the original set, that came with all the original stuff. That's all he had, really.
So he had the original comics from the figures from the 80s, the original line of Mattel figures.
And that's for the first, I want to say 10 years of his life, that was his biggest exposure to pop culture and to what was going on. So when we were recording the album, we kind of dove into that, and we would, in between takes, we would be watching He-Man episodes, Masters of the Universe episodes, and so that slowly grew into us just buying random Masters of the Universe stuff and diving more and more into the lore of it, and then somewhat into the newer comics, and so somehow I was just always beside Masters of the Universe and got roped into it.
Now, when you say you guys were watching the cartoon, were you watching the original 80s cartoon, or were you watching the 2002 re-release?
The 80s, because...
So you were into the show, or you're into the property mostly because of the cartoon and the comics, and a little bit from the later stage figures.
Yeah, the later stage, and then, once again, then looking back at the older figures, because one of Nathan's biggest goals for the longest time was to have the giant Castle Grayskull set with all the 80s figures. And so we would go to a lot of places that would have them, so I kind of became very, very familiar with the older figures too by looking at them at a ton of random places here and there.
See, that's so interesting to me, because my Masters of the Universe love, and I didn't even realize it until I started working on my own list, does come from those 80s figures. Of course, I played with them as a very small child. I was a toddler when He-Man started airing, and that was my first big... That and the Muppets were my first big fan experiences. I had a ton of the figures. I watched the cartoon religiously, but I realized when I was creating this list and talking about characters I love, I was really looking at the figures and the fun I had playing with those action figures. And in fact, something that I made for my personal list that you didn't, of course, because you didn't really have the exposure. I actually have a vehicles and playsets list that I wanted to talk about as well, because stuff that it anchors into me, and it really triggers a lot of nostalgia for me. It's kind of funny, your exposure as such a young man to the 2002 series. You know, you said you were out of age for that demographic. In 2002, I was 21. So I was I was either absolutely out of the demographic or absolutely 100% in the demographic, depending on which angle you're coming at it from. But all of my true and real love for He-Man and the Masters of the Universe comes from the action figures. So that's probably what I'm going to end up talking about a lot on this particular show. So we wanted to do some top 10 lists for our favorite Masters of the Universe stuff. Do you want to start with heroes or villains?
I want to start... let's go with villains. But before we do that, I do want to have to do a quick thank you to everyone who listened to our last podcast.
Yes, absolutely.
Because we got way more listens and downloads and more response than we normally get, and most of it was very positive and in a very good way. So if you listen to that last one and you're back to listen to this one, no, it's very different, but thank you so much because that was really awesome, and hopefully you enjoy our random Masters Universalist to follow up on this cast.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you want to let us know whether or not doing lists like this is a good idea, if you'd rather us stick to comics news and comics reviews, you can always hit us up on Twitter. We're both very active on Twitter. I am at Voodoo Ben.
I'm at HellhoundF5.
Or you can hit us up in our email. We are blahblahpodcast, all one word, @gmail.com.
Yeah.
And without further ado, let's go ahead and hit the villains, man.
Yeah, let's do it. You want to start or you want me to start?
I'll start. I don't mind starting.
Okay.
Starting at number 10, and again, this totally has to do with the action figure because I don't even remember if he even made the cartoon series, but my number 10 is Too Bad. Who was the action figure with two heads. And it was cool. You could squeeze his legs and his heads would bop together, which I know is like a terrible feature, but it was funny. And I really remember the color scheme of this action figure being really distinct. One of the two characters was purple, and it was just this really bright, vibrant purple that contrasted with the other character, who honestly I can't even remember what color he was. I think he was like gray or something, so just completely dull. And he was one of Skeletor's worst henchmen. You know, he was of two minds about everything, so he really couldn't get anything done. But as a kid, I thought he was hilarious, and I thought the action figure was super cool. So yeah, short and sweet, but my number 10 would be Too Bad.
Very nice. Mine will probably be short and sweet too. Oh, and before I'll do a little mention earlier, like I said, most of this is because of Nathan introducing me to this stuff. And if you guys don't know, he's been on a few episodes. He's my insane, crazy best friend.
Musician partner.
Yes, and partner in music. So without further ado, my number 10, it's Trapjaw.
Really? Number 10?
Yeah. Well, this is... I have a lot of people on here because I go basically purely off of... Like I said, I was introducing the show, and throughout the different shows and through the comics and stuff. And in the 80s cartoon, he's, everyone's everyone's very cheesy and very lovable in their own way. He was in the 80s show, I didn't really like him that much because his arm just always seemed really weird to me because it was kind of too short and kind of weird. But then, of course, in the 2002 and then the later toy lines, all that stuff, he became like this mecha badass with the overcompensated cable-esque arm with giant mechanical shit going on. And it was that so crazy out there that I loved that one. But yeah, so number 10 on my list is Trapjaw.
You are going to be hearing so much about Trapjaw from me, but it's going to be much further from now.
Okay.
My number 9, again, kind of an out there choice and totally based on his really, really kick-ass action figure, was a Web Store.
Oh!
Yeah,
I know.
I will tell you from experience, if you stepped on his spiky head, it hurt like a motherfucker. Not as bad as Spycore, who of course was covered in spikes and that kind of hurt, but he had this really, really sharp like fin on the top of his head, and it was not fun. But his action feature, he had this like, it shot a grappling hook, and it would like, you kind of bzzz, kind of around, and it was always fun trying to make up things for reasons for him to kind of come down out of the sky and start kicking ass. And he was also, again, really distinct looking. He really didn't have like, kind of like Too Bad. He just had a basic monster face, but he was a really shocking blue color that really stood out and was just a super neat figure. So yeah, based purely on the toy, Web Store was fucking amazing.
Very cool. He may be on my list too. But my probably another one that I don't know if she'll be higher on yours, but number 9 is Evelyn.
She's a bit higher on mine, yeah.
Yes, Evelyn, the kind of witchy sidekick to Skeletor. Someone who I always liked because she was, Skeletor was one of his main go-tos, but was always kind of in it for herself, and always just, at the end of the day, did what she wanted to, and it just happened that most of what Skeletor wanted to do kind of followed up with her ideas.
Yeah, that's a lot of what I was going to say about her. I really love that she's basically the second in command, and a lot like Starscream over in Transformers, she very clearly has her own agenda. Unlike Starscream, she doesn't try to usurp Skeletor every episode, but she does kind of manipulate things to kind of turn out her way in a very smart and subtle tactic. She's a lot of fun. So yeah, she's on my list. I might talk about her a little bit higher up on the list. So that gets us to number 8.
Yes.
My number 8 is actually, I mentioned the Fright Zone earlier. My number 8 is Hordak.
Hordak, I like him.
I like Hordak a lot. He's technically a She-Ra villain, but I mean, he was kind of. They really tried to do something big with him and kind of make him Skeletor's former master / boss / teacher, and really kind of put him over Skeletor. And he had a fucking great design. I mean, that chalk white face with the red eyes and the sharp teeth, and the turned into a rocket for some reason, which was never properly explained in my mind. But he was really well designed. He was pure distilled evil. The little bone collar that he had, the bat that kind of became the markings for all of the evil Horde characters, that symbol that marked them all. He was just a fucking cool looking figure, and I can't really think of anything great. The only thing there was in the episode that debuted She-Ra, and it's not even a Hordak moment, it's a Skeletor moment, but it's probably my favorite actual moment in Masters of the Universe history. And if we had a website, I would post a clip to this because it's fucking hilarious. But Hordak is explaining something to him. I think he's actually explaining that She-Ra and He-Man are actually twins. And Skeletor's reaction is pause. What? It's fucking hilarious, and it's the way that Skeletor's line reading on that is just amazing. I love it to death. But yeah, we're not talking about Skeletor, we're talking about Hordak, and just visually, he is brilliant. He was a little scary when I was 3 or 4 years old, and I really appreciated that in my villainy.
So yeah, that's what you need. And well, speaking of scary, actually, he's already been on your list, but my number 8 is Web Store.
Nice!
Basically because in the 2002 show, his redesign, he was like terrifying looking, almost like the difference between Spider-Man and Man-Spider. He's like horrifying looking.
I don't know if I got to that episode. That's awesome.
But yeah, that's the majority of the reason he's on my list there is just because he was horrifying looking. He had the legs that would extend out like crazy and was much more spider than man. And I just remember, I don't know if he was in a lot of episodes or what he was in, but I know there's a few episodes where he was the main villain and focused on. And he was always creepy. And then like the relaunch of Toys, he was one of the coolest figures of those. And he was another one of those characters that just kind of had his own stuff going on. And what I liked about He-Man, you felt like all these characters had their own stuff going on, and they were assembling, but in a weird way, you never really saw what they had going on, so it left this big air of mystery around them.
Yeah, if you don't mind me going off on a little bit of a tangent, something I kind of want to talk about. One of the reasons I love the Masters of the Universe as a whole, not just the figures, not just the characters, not just these lists, it does, the whole universe feels full. It feels like there's a lot of shit going on. The mixture of magic and technology, like cheek by jowl in the same place, in the same universe, and without anybody ever really commenting on the fact that this is, they're two entirely separate ideas and things, is really, really interesting and spectacular. And to be exposed to that at such a young age like I was, it definitely put that kind of dichotomy in my head as something that worked and something that was cool and neat, and not just in a weird steampunky way, but as something that could just have grown together and exist together. And you're absolutely right. To go along with that idea of there's this whole world of stuff going on, it's not just the stuff, it's the characters themselves. They all have schemes and plots and motivations. The heroes are trying to better their kingdom. They're legitimately trying to run a kingdom and make things better for the populace. And the villains are all trying to do their own shit and go their own way. And yeah, a lot of them are serving Skeletor in that capacity. But like we talked about Evil Lynn, and in fact, I'll just go ahead and cut to it. My number 7 is Evil Lynn.
Oh, nice.
Again, she's a magician. She's fucking Zatanna of this world. She's got a lot of magic ability. And she uses it in service of Skeletor, but she also absolutely uses it in service of herself. Yeah. She wants ultimately she wants the power for herself, and if serving Skeletor is going to get her power, well, she'll handle him later. But yeah, the overall, again, universe of Masters of the Universe, I think, is so clever and original in that it originally started as just basically a Conan knockoff. I mean, it was very much a barbarian book that grew into its own life and its own world, and I really think that's something special and fantastic about the property.
No, yeah, it's why I think I became so interested after being not only introduced into it, but being able to see it through someone who really loved it, and seeing how much those characters could mean to people. Because, of course, growing up in my era, you saw it made fun of a ton, even up until the 2002 release, and even a little bit after that. But when you look back and see, when people look at it, not just through nostalgic eyes, but through eyes that really love and care for those characters, it's like looking at, once again, the Kirby-esque characters and seeing that even though they have these elements that are cheesy, there's so much to them that it's worth forgiving the weird stuff, and the weird stuff becomes what a lot of people love about them.
Absolutely. That's a really good comparison. Kirby's Fourth World, I mean, it's kind of an open secret that a lot of the live-action Masters of the Universe film was inspired by Fourth World visuals. I mean, they use a fucking boom tube.
Yeah.
That's how they travel between dimensions. The Cosmic Key is more or less a mother box. Skeletor's throne room and Skeletor himself have a lot of dark side elements in them. So the Jack Kirby Masters of the Universe comparison is by no means far off. It's very close, and I really appreciate you bringing it up like that.
No, of course. It's something that you've mentioned a lot, and we've talked about before on here, but it's something that's very very interesting. And getting back to the list, I realized we're kind of in for mostly on my list the next few, even though I just mentioned a lot of He-Man, very She-Ra-esque villains.
Which is absolutely fine. She-Ra, I did not adore the series like I adored Masters of the Universe, but I am very familiar with it. Like I say, my runners-up list has a couple of Evil Horde villains on it that I really appreciated. So please, by all means, like I said, Evil Lyn, I was short with her, but we already kind of talked about her. She's my number 7.
Nice. Well, my number 7, kind of very similar to Evil Lyn, is Catra. Or Catra. However you say it. The, essentially, what started off as supposed to be She-Ra's nemesis.
Right, I kind of remember her.
Basically looks like a Scarlet Witch.
Okay, yes, yeah, totally.
Very much a lot like Evil Lyn for a lot of same reasons, but she, once again, was just a very, very powerful figure in this world that was supposed to be the main villain, but just kind of got thrown in with the Evil Horde because, of course, it made sense for the TV show. It made sense to do more connections to everything.
Right.
And the animated version of her that I've only seen a few things of, and she was just a badass character, I thought. I know she's teamed up with Skeletor to destroy Hordak in an episode. And
okay, that's amazing. That is super badass.
I know there's been a lot of crazy stuff like that, and she's just a fun character that never gets mentioned.
That is super cool. It's kind of funny. My number 6 is also kind of a character who's really a very low villain on the totem pole, but just his visuals, I adore them so much. I don't even know if I can actually point to any point in the series where he was, worthwhile or cool. But God, I love Clawful so fucking much. I can't even tell you. He's a half crab dude with a He-Man sculpt body, but they put a little weird shell on him, so he's kind of got what looks like almost like a pot belly. And then his right hand is a giant fucking claw.
Yep.
And it had a little trigger on it that can make you go kick, 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 kick the claw. And I love that so much. It was so cool. And he's always been one of my favorite villains. He's always been one of my favorite henchmen. He, in my little He-Man based world, basically replaced Beastman as Skeletor's right-hand boob. The guy that would always constantly fuck things up, but we're still around for some reason all the time. I loved Clawful so fucking much. So he's my number 6. I love him. The end.
Oh, that's okay. There's a lot of characters, especially coming up on my list, on both lists, that are not necessarily great characters or even designed that incredibly well. I just liked how they were designed and really loved their look and thought they could be cool. So that's coming up a lot.
My hero list is going to be full of stuff that are basically like, I had fun playing with them when I was a kid. Fuck you.
Well, my number 6 is the exactly cool one of Evil Lyn for the She-Ra universe. It's Shadow Weaver.
Yes. Okay. Very nice.
in look, you could a sexy evil orca essentially. Kind of Scarlet Witchess again. Just a very, very powerful, the second in command of Hordak, and someone who, once again, the thing with He-Man was just the characters, taking character parts and making them for multiple characters, redesigning them so they could make the toys simply and efficiently. It's always interesting to see how that happens, and seeing how the designs were used again. Like I said, seeing the Orca kind of template, but transformed into a full female Evelyn character.
That is fantastic, and actually brings back something I wanted to kind of talk about that I've totally forgot to talk about. Going back to Evelyn again, I know she's just the Teyla sculpt with a different head, but Teyla did not make, spoiler alert, Teyla did not make my top 10 heroes list because her original action figure was so shitty and boring. But you give her a different head sculpt with that neat, weird crown thing that Evelyn had going, dye her skin yellow for whatever godforsaken reason. I mean, Evelyn clearly had a really bad case of jaundice. Yeah. And make it purple instead of that dull white and gold bullshit, and all of a sudden that figure works. So, yeah, it's kind of amazing how a sculpt is so dull and standard and boring for one character, but so spiced up and neat for another character. Same thing with Beastman and Mossman. The Beastman toy is fine. I mean, it's what you would expect for the Beastman toy. The Mossman toy is fucking cool. They just put a little bit of flock on there and dyed it green, and all of a sudden it's like, hey, this is neat. Spoiler alert, neither Beastman or Mossman are on either of my lists, but I just thought that was a great example of toys. Are we on to number 5?
Yes, number 5.
Okay, my number 5 is probably the weirdest one on my list, and I actually have a short speech written for this. My number 5 is Stinkor.
I think I know why he's on your list.
My reasoning for Stinkor is fuck all of you. His action figure was beautiful, and I don't have a sense of smell, so his special power didn't bother me. I was born without a sense of smell, so I didn't realize he actually stank.
Oh, yeah, and could possibly infect the other figures because of the, weird, what was it that made him actually stink? I can't remember.
They actually used a different plastic for him, and the plastic naturally just smelled bad.
Yeah, and if it was left in a toy chest with the other figures because of a closed container, it would just naturally infect other people.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure my entire Masters of the Universe collection stank to high heaven, and I did not know because I have never had a sense of smell. But yeah, his figure was awesome. The paint job was fantastic. The construction they put for the chest, the toy, and then it kind of had that rebreather on his mouth, and he had a little gun thing, and I think it was Zodac's gun actually, but just everything about him, his paint sculpt was awesome. He's a gorgeous looking figure, and the reason everybody would hate him did not bother me at all. So yeah, Stinkor is my number 5, motherfuckers.
Well, my number 5, the last of my She-Ra run here.
Nice.
Entrapta. Which
you like the female villains, man.
I do. They were awesome. Entrapta kind of second command to Catra Carter, however you say her name. The technician of that team would make awesome stuff. And I just like the cool look of the long purple hair that would attack people.
Yeah, she was cool. I actually have a very clear memory of her visual, and she had a very, very solid visual. Absolutely.
Yes, I always thought she was cool. And plus, she reminded me so much, especially coming from such a comic world. She not only because she's kind of very similar to Medusa from the Marvel Universe in some weird ways, she just looks like she'd fit in almost any comic universe as well as the He-Man universe, which I always liked.
Very true. Absolutely.
And that's all the reasons I have, but that's her.
Very cool. The rest of mine, my top 4, are very, very standard characters for a list like this. I'm not even going to be ashamed. My heroes are super weird and esoteric, but my villains list, my top 4, are pretty much the bog standard, with the possible exception of my number 4, which is Merman.
Ooh.
Yeah, I thought he was cool in the TV show. He actually did a lot. Anytime He-Man had any kind of fight or anything that had to do with water or a lake or something, which there was a surprising amount of bodies of water on Eternia. Merman was there. He was there fucking shit up and causing shit to break down. And then his figure, which honestly looked nothing like the figure, it was the Stinkor head was based on the Merman head for the toy, so he didn't have the weird stick out gills or anything. But he had those weird, crazy, popped out eyes. Just a really pretty green paint job. His armor was pretty distinct. It actually kind of looked like coral, and he had that weird coral sword. It was just, like I said, it was very distinct. It was distinct enough that I still remember it all these years later, and it was one that I really enjoyed. So again, I know that and Namor and all those guys usually kind of tend to get short shrift, but in Eternia, in the Masters of the Universe world, Merman kicked a lot of ass. So he is my number 4.
Very cool. My number 4 is based purely off design, essentially, because I think he only appeared in 2 episodes of the 2002 series that I know of, and I think I think he had or is having a figure release of the new classics or whatever line they're doing. And I know he's been in some comics, so my number 4 is Procrustes. Who
I actually don't know that one.
He basically looks like a blue devil, like straight up devil. He's a warlord of Eternia. He was kind of made essentially to be another giant evil. And he just looks crazy. Like, he looks awesome. He looks like the devil. And when you have all these crazy characters, and then you have a giant blue devil with like neon blue looking skin on his chest and giant horns and red eyes and a cape, of course, just look badass.
Of course.
He just looked badass, and he was ready to go. And I hope more is done with that character in the future, because you have so many great heroes and villains. It's always acceptable to have more, especially when you have just these crazy-looking, interesting ones that you don't know what they're going to do.
He sounds fascinating. I wish I knew more about him. I'll have to dig into him. I think my friend Brendan might be able to help me with that. I have one of the guys that works at my LCS is the biggest He-Man / Ninja Turtles fan I know, and that's coming from me. So that really means something. And he'll probably know all about this guy, and hopefully he'll be able to recommend me some comics or something where I can read up on him. That is fantastic, dude.
Here, I know his appearances. All I can find is in He-Man and Master Universe 2002, Season 2, Episode 29 and 33.
Okay, I have the DVDs. I haven't watched into Season 2 yet, so I'll probably watch those tonight. I'm damned excited.
There you go.
Okay, my number 3, again, very classic, very traditional choice, Triclops.
Yeah, he almost made mine.
Do I have to explain why Triclops is badass?
Not really.
For the casual listener, I'll get into it a little bit. For one thing, the 3 eyes, each of which do something cool and mechanical, is fucking awesome. It's something that, again, it kind of goes back to the idea, because he's got the 3 eyes that like do laser blasts and crazy shit, which is very tech-based, and clearly he wasn't born that way. He's had some technological modifications and upgrades. He's a cyborg, but he uses a fucking sword. He came with a sword. He fights He-Man with a sword. And that's so fucking cool. He's got technological upgrades, but he'll still pick up a blade and cut a motherfucker. That's fucking awesome. On top of that, if I remember his backstory correctly, he's like an assassin or a bounty hunter or something. I may be making that up, but I seem to remember from his original comic that came with this action figure that he was basically a sword for hire, and Skeletor basically put him on retainer.
Once again, that sounds completely correct from what I researched, but I could be wrong, because I was trying to refresh myself on all his characters, and there is a character there is. I can't remember if it's Triclops or... Oh, no, what's the dude who was in it? Was Triclops in the movie?
No, they replaced him with some other boring big sword guy. He was basically a reverse He-Man. He had the weird, he had one eye covered.
Yeah,
he was bald. He was very clearly a Triclops on a budget, but he was different enough that they actually gave him a distinct action figure.
Yeah, I know that dude had that kind of story, but because he was based off Triclops, that could very easily mean Triclops is the same
Right.
Sort of.
And if my buddy Brendan listens to this podcast, which I hope he does, I'm actually going to try to make sure he does. I think he'll enjoy it. Yes. But if I got that wrong, I'm sure he'll correct me, and I will appreciate it if he does. But yeah, my number 3, super classic, Triclops. He's amazing. Again, green color scheme. The MOTU universe had a pretty... Overall, I'd say pretty limited color palette, but they really knew how to use what they had. Clawvel had that really bright red. Evelyn had the yellow and purple and blue thing going on. And then Merman and Triclops both had just that very distinct green to their figures and to their accoutrement, which was just fucking... I loved it. So yeah, Triclops number 3.
Nice. Well, my number 3, he's already been mentioned today, but I always liked his design, and he's basically the... Or basically, he's kind of is like Thanos or Darkseid or Apocalypse of the world. I'm going with Hordak for number 3.
Very nice.
You talked about earlier. He's cool. I've always liked the idea of there being a greater evil than the main evil, and he was kind of that one in the distance that wasn't done a lot with for a long time, and then he's here, and Skeletor and He-Man both want him gone for a few episodes at least, and it's that cool triangle of no one liking each other.
Right. 2 things, actually, touching back on that. One, I never made the Darkseid connection, which is weird because we were already talking about the Jack Kirby connections, but that's entirely true. Yep. Hordak is to the MOTU universe what Darkseid is to the DC universe. You're fucking brilliant.
Yes, thank you. I know.
That's awesome. The other thing I wanted to bring up, did you read the Origin of Hordak one-shot that came out of IDW a couple of years ago?
I did not, no, but I know what you're talking about, actually.
1, it's fucking fantastic. 2, it's written and drawn by Keith Giffen. 3, it's Keith Giffen doing his best Jack Kirby impression, the same impression he did for those OMAC comics that you remember I love so much.
Yeah.
So it's literally Hordak by a guy drawing like Jack Kirby. That is what the comic is. It's the closest we'll ever get to Jack Kirby doing Masters of the Universe, and it will blow your fucking mind, dude. It is fucking fantastic.
I'm sure I could find that for not that much, too.
It's like $1.99 on Comixology right now,
hell yeah.
if you wanted to get the digital version.
I can totally do that.
Yes, please do. And any listeners out there who have any kind of interest in what we're talking about at all, if you read one Masters of the Universe comic, read The Origin of Hordak by Keith Giffen. Oh my god, it is so fantastic. There's one panel in it that I don't like because it's very clearly foreshadowing for the DC Universe versus Masters of the Universe crossover, which apparently was fine. I don't know. I haven't actually read that one. But the issue itself is just awesome. So yeah, that's additional love for Hordak that I totally forgot to mention earlier, but you're absolutely right, and he well deserves number 3 on your list.
Awesome.
Number 2 on my list is Trapjaw, motherfucker.
Hey, he made an appearance earlier.
Trapjaw is amazing. Okay, here's all the reasons Trapjaw is amazing. 1, he had the coolest, most unique figure from the original Wave 1 of the Masters of the Universe figure. The fact that you could change out his arm to be a gun or a claw or another thing that I don't remember because I always use gun or claw. He also had the little weird thing on the top of his head you could slide a string through, so much like Webstore, you could kind of make him, kind of dive bomb people, which was fucking great. And in addition to all that other great stuff that his figure had going for him, his jaw actually moved up and down, and he was called Trapjaw, and his little red jaw, which had spikes on it because it was mean, and it moved up and down, and that was cool. You could actually make him talk. When you're usually talking action figures, you just kind of wave them at each other, but with Trapjaw, you would actually move his fucking jaw, and that's fucking fantastic. Thing number 2 that makes Trapjaw awesome. His comic from his original Wave 1 action figure was that he was much like Hordak. He was a warlord from another dimension. Skeletor accidentally transported himself and He-Man to Trapjaw's dimension, and they were like, oh shit, this guy's too strong for us. They actually teamed up to take Trapjaw down because Trapjaw was that dangerous. Thing number 3 that makes Trapjaw cool, his entire fucking design. I don't care that I already said it once. Flash forward to 2002, they give him that crazy robot arm that does all the fucking things that you want to. Plus, they make him like 12 feet tall and 5 feet wide. Yeah. He's a fucking monster. Oh, yeah. He is a monster in a world of monsters, and that's saying something.
Solid points.
Plus, his color scheme, again, is just weird as hell, because he's got that blue body, which you assume has to be some kind of unitard or something, because he's got that bright neon green face that sticks out of a red helmet with the red jaw, which, again, best possible color scheme because it makes it pop. Wes Craven said that the whole reason he gave Freddy Krueger the Christmas sweater, the red and green Christmas sweater, is because red and green are the two most contrasting colors on the color spectrum. It makes them distinct. It makes them stand out. So to give this character the red helmet with the red jaw and then the bright neon green face, he stood out. He was just super unique.
I'll give you that. He was. That's why he made my top 10 too.
Yes, he made your number 10, asshole.
Hey, out of a universe of characters, he made top 10.
That's true. I'll stop giving you shit. But yeah, Trapjaw is definitely number 2 with a bullet, very nearly number 1. When I originally conceived the list, it was like, okay, Trapjaw is number 1, and who else is there? But then I realized there is one villain that ultimately trumps Trapjaw. But of course, you have a number 2 to get to.
Yes, I do. You're gonna hate my number 1.
That's interesting. I can't wait to hear your number 1.
My number 2 is Skeletor.
Your number 2 is Skeletor. Let's hear it, man.
Well, for one, I would like the original story is kind of redone, but originally he was promoted as like an evil demon from another dimension. Then he kind of was transformed to He-Man's uncle.
Which I hate.
Yeah, I'm not a big...
I hate the whole Keldor thing. Yeah. I'm not even going to lie.
No, I do too, because I thought the whole idea of him being this, like, once again, Master Universe kind of ends up being a tale of a ton of different, ends up being like Battle World or Convergence from DC, where it's a ton of different characters from different universes basically fighting for this land that is none of their own.
Right.
So I always like the idea of an evil demon from another dimension coming in and him being the ultimate villain. And of course, him just being the very basic but still striking design of just a walking skeleton. And him being so, even how it's corny as the old episodes are and as awesome as they are for those reasons, his plans always being very direct and very to the point, and even being as dumb as he can basically be made out to be, he still somehow manages to control an army of the worst villains and craziest people in any universe. So there's always been something intriguing about that character.
Right. That's it. Funny because my number 1 is Skeletor.
Ah, there we go.
Because honestly, Skeletor, not just number 1 on my list of villains for the Master Universe, Skeletor is one of my favorite villains in fiction. Not even joking, not even being a little bit facetious. I adore him. Again, we're gonna talk about design-wise.
Yes.
He's got the fucking bodybuilder's body because of the figure design.
Yeah.
But his little, instead of, where He-Man had that whatever symbol it was on his bandolier, he had the crossbones on his bandolier. He's got a staff with the fucking ram's head on it. He wears the cloak and the hood covers that bright yellow face, and you've all, not counting the 2002 series, you always kind of wondered as a kid, what happened to his face? Why is it a skull? That's so intriguing. That's so interesting. And on top of that, he's a character who's evil for the sake of being evil. Except for the Christmas special, which is hilarious because he's like, but I want to be evil. And he's actually kind of being turned by the goodness of Christmas, which is its whole own thing. Skeletor loves being a bad guy. He loves being evil. He wants to take over Eternia and do bad shit. He's not Dr. Doom, where he thinks he would be a better ruler than the rest of the world's rulers combined. He just wants to fuck everything up and make everything miserable for everybody. And he, like you said, he somehow convinced all of these other creatures that he should be able to do this and that they should help him achieve this goal. That's nuts, and it's so fucking cool. I mean, how charismatic is a dude with no face that he can get you to follow him when his plan is, I want to make things terrible forever?
Yeah.
So yeah, Skeletor, legit up there seriously with like the Joker and Dr. Doom and George W. Bush as the most legitimately evil people in the world, and my favorite villain. One of my favorite villains, period.
Good. Well, mine, I'm gonna give a little history on mine for it to make more sense when I say it. As I said, we would be watching the 80s show, and of course we're making music and we're in very heavy story writing modes, just how we would watch stuff. We would associate with different characters and different stuff, and we kind of, just played out musically, what we were seeing and doing. It kind of influenced music, kind of did some interesting effects. But anyway, there's always two characters we would associate with the most. Number 2 being the one Nathan, of course, always did. Who he always loves characters like that, and I love characters like that too. But the character I always associated more was the character that is essentially the Animal Man of the He-Man universe. I'm going Beastman number 1.
Dude, you get a high five. He didn't show up on my list at all, but I am super impressed. Please elucidate why.
One, like I said, I love Animal Man to death. And Beastman, if you look at his just powers on a power level, he is essentially Animal Man. He can not only basically tell animals what to do, can, in some comics and some stuff, borrow powers and kind of use them to his advantage. He's all once kind of like Trapjaw. He has led and been in charge of some crazy, insane stuff. And he's also one of those people, a great pairing of Beastman. You talk about Skeletor doing crazy stuff. Beastman, 99.9% of the time, telling Skeletor how dumb he is, but still going along with the plan. And also just being accidental comic relief constantly.
Yeah, honestly, I think that may have been why he doesn't show up on my list, is that more so than any of the characters, he really did end up being the comic relief character, and it really softened the blow of having him around.
It did, and until then you have the 2002 relaunch where he kind of, but they go half and half. They start off going overboard on him, where he's almost too different from the original character, where he becomes more beast than man and just this monster, and once again, almost terrifying to a point.
And see, I like that.
No,
that was actually how I would have played Beastman if I had been writing something MOTU style. I would almost want not just a Beast Man, I want Beastmen. I want that to be another almost faction. You know, just the wild men of the Attorney in Himalayas.
I think that's why.
And this one was just smart enough to choose a side.
Yes, and I've always kind of wanted something like that too, because I feel like there's so much fertile ground there for. That's an area that hasn't been. I mean, there's a lot of areas that haven't been covered, but that one in particular, you see some of, Beastman's lineage. You see a little bit of people like him, and you know this exists, but you don't have a ton going on there because he is so associated with Skeletor that those two kind of become one and the same because they're so hooked at the ankle to each other. I mean, you have the kind of the trinity of Skeletor, Beastman, and Evil Lyn on this side, and they become a lot of their stories just intertwined because they're always together. But you don't see a lot of Beastman. I think that's what always intrigued me about him, because there seemed to be more to him, and plus he is still fighting these incredibly powerful gods essentially and standing on his own, and still being, even with being a comic relief, he was still feared by a lot of people, which is hard to do. So I like that reason.
Yeah, dude. Like I say, he did not show up on my He did not show up on my list at all. I love the fact that he's number 1 on yours. I think that's absolutely fantastic.
Yeah.
I am much less perturbed by the fact that Beastman is number 1 than I am that Trapjaw's number 10.
Okay, well, there we go.
Do we want to do runners up real quick? Did you have any runners up?
I had no runners up, so go ahead and give me yours.
All right, I'll just be real quick about this. My runners up, no particular order. Montana. Fucking kick-ass figure. Those bonkers eyes that were sticking out. He was a She-Ra villain. He had the crazy eyes that just kind of stuck out everywhere, and he was a really cool looking figure. I really liked him a lot. Beastman did make my runners up.
Yay.
Like I say, I've always been kind of cool on Beastman, and it's for the reasons I talked about. I thought the comic relief just kind of bugged me. I really wanted to see him more as a beast man.
Yeah.
And the whole controlling animals thing, it never really jived with me the way it's jiving with you. I do like Animal Man, but I don't know. I was just always cool on the character, and I had my own ideas of how I kind of wish they'd handled him. Leech, again, from the Evil Horde line. He was a really super cool looking toy, but he had the suction cups for hands, and they were, of course, children's toy suction cups, and they were shitty. Spycore, who I mentioned earlier, he was purple and spiky. He was a good-looking figure. He was just really gorgeous, and if I hadn't had more fun playing with Web Store, Spycore probably would have made the list. Panther, the soft velvety purple cover that they put on a Battle Cat figure was just neat. Even though you could tell where they were the same toy, just remade, he had a distinct look to him, and I really liked it. Grizzlor, again, Evil Horde. He was a better Beastman because he actually had the hair. You know, that was his feature, was that he had the hair, and that face was just genuinely scary in a way that I never really thought Beastman's was. And then my last runner-up, he and Clawful were neck and neck for a long time. I love Whiplash. I loved the tail feature that he had. Again, that just the bright green color was enough to really draw me to him. I thought he was a cool figure, but he just misses it. Clawful ultimately is a better figure.
I agree. But yeah, I actually, a lot of those, when looking at the overall character designs, just who I like, there were several that made the almost list, but I didn't, like I said, I didn't write any of them down or take notes on them outside of, oh, they were cool. They almost made it.
No problem. Like I said, I got pretty super obsessive with this particular top 10. So,
no problem.
It's a huge nostalgia kick for me. Just sitting there and actually remembering playing with these figures as a child was a big deal.
That's awesome.
So since I started the villains, do you want to kick us off on the heroes?
Yes. See, okay, heroes, like I said earlier, were kind of harder for me because I've always, in most things, it's been drawn to the villains, and especially in this, I always felt that the villains normally had a cooler look to them. Not always, but for me personally, the majority of the time, they had cooler stuff, so it was harder for me to do just villains, or just heroes, sorry. Mm-hmm. But I definitely have the 10 that I do like a lot, so I don't want to sound like I don't like them. I do like them,
right.
Just harder to list to do. But number 10, we talked about Teyla, and she's not on my list either, but I do kind of have the roundabout way of putting on our list. I put the goddess Trilla on it, on my number 10.
Okay.
Who, for those who don't know, was Teyla. I didn't completely understand this, but Teyla was like partially made of stuff from her, or something along those lines.
Well, it's all related to the Sorceress, right? Because I don't know if it was ever explicit in the original cartoon, but in the 2002 remake, they made it pretty explicit that Man-at-Arms and the Sorceress hooked up, and Teyla is the Sorceress's kid.
Yeah, well, the goddess is the Eternian deity that takes care of the natural order and protecting Castle Grayskull. So people don't plunder it, of course. Come on now. It's originally provided the person who gave He-Man like armor and weapons, all that kind of stuff. It's a very important character. Fun character, cool. Depending on the design of the characters, all the different iterations of shows and comics, it can be really cool or really boring. But to her cool, I always took these characters at their coolest look, and there was some cool looks for her.
Absolutely.
But yeah, so Goddess would be my number 10.
One thing I do want to say, much like Spider-Man and Batman, who are absolutely cool and fantastic characters in their own right, the Masters of the Universe, the villains, honestly, are cooler than the heroes. Yeah. It's one of those things. It happens. It happens a lot in fiction. The bad guys just end up being neater looking and usually having cooler overall stories than the heroes. So it's totally understandable that your villains list was easier to put together than your heroes list. Oh, yeah. Having said that, my number 10 actually debuted what they thought was a villain, and in fact, when they initially, I'm pretty sure when he was part of Wave 1, and I want to say his card listed him as a villain when he originally came out, and that's Zodac. Ooh. The alien invader who originally thought of as a villain kind of became a hero. I think the new series played him better, just as the whole mysterious visitor angle, who really didn't have a place on the good side or bad side of the Eternian conflict, as much as kind of like the Watcher was just there to kind of see what happened. He had a cool design. His helmet was super awesome. He came with a neat space ray gun, and I like Zodac. Okay. There's really not much I can say about it beyond I thought he was a super cool looking character. Also, and this is a super random memory. It's weird that I actually remember something from this young. I could not have been more than 3 years old. I was probably younger than that, but I have a very distinct memory of coloring in a He-Man coloring book, and it was a picture of Zodac, and it was the first time I'd ever stayed inside the lines when I was coloring.
Oh, that's a great first.
And I remember my mom
memory.
being super, super proud and showing it to my dad, and it was this random picture of Zodac, and I was very, very clear about I had to use red and white because those were the colors of his costume, and I managed to stay inside the lines on the entire picture.
Good job.
So I like I say, I could not have been more than 3. I was probably 2 or 3 when I did it. So yeah, we're talking about literally a 30-year-old memory.
Ooh. I don't have that kind of connection to any of mine on my list, to be honest. Beastman Skeletor about the closest I had for a sweet moment on this list.
Right.
Just my best friend and me, they reminded us of each other. That's about as sweet as I got in there. But so to bring it down from that sweet moment, my number 9 is chosen for completely different. My number 9 is a character I thought was so weird and odd and so dumb looking at first that I had to put him on her because he completely made the roundabout of being just dumb to so dumb it was cool and ridiculous. So my number 9 is Titus.
Okay, again, you're choosing figures that I'm actually not very familiar with. Who is this one?
Titus was essentially a giant version of He-Man.
Okay.
He was a contemporary around like King Grayskull, Hero.
Okay.
Giant dude. Basically a giant ancient dude.
I did not know his name. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. He was, I think he was a spin-off. I know a spin-off Masters of the Universe that kind of explored. He was in part of that line that explored the kind of prehistoric stuff.
Right, yeah. Much later in the series, yeah.
Yeah, but it was just, to me, at first, such a dumb idea because, once again, it's like, okay, well, he's a character. If you look him up, he just looks like a tall He-Man. Even the characters, he was a taller figure. And always drawn just taller, and it's essentially the only difference. But then you get into the whole lore of, well, there's always been a He-Man. There's always been someone to represent the time. Like, in a weird way, it makes sense. So, for that dumb reason, my number 9 is Titus.
That's cool. Man, I thought my number 9 was an esoteric choice. My number 9 is Roboto.
Ooh, Roboto.
He was a robot.
Yep.
That I'm pretty sure Man-at-Arms built.
Yes, I believe that's right.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I just said, yeah, I think that's right.
Yeah, and his action figure, you moved his arms, and he had a clear chest, and it had gears in it, and when he moved his arms, the gears rotated around, and also, much like Trapjaw, he had like a visor thing or a thing on his face that kind of moved up and down, so you could mimic speaking when you were playing with this figure, and those were just really cool features, and I remember as a child, just, moving his arms up and down and up and down and watching those little gears go inside. And again, just being literally a toddler, having no real idea how that worked and wanting to know what made the toy do things like this. It legitimately inspired curiosity and interested me in mechanical sciences. I didn't really follow up on it, but it was there. It was something that I can look back to and point to and say, that made me think as a little boy. And also, he was just a cool-looking figure. I liked him. So, yeah, number 9 is Roboto.
God damn it, you threw in a little bit there again where you had a lot of heart to the character and a lot of heart to why you chose it. My number 8 was chosen because he reminded me of a cool badass, and my number 8 is Ryoblast.
Yeah.
He's the lone gunsman character. He's a...
You realize it's pronounced Rio Blast?
Really?
Yeah, because it was like the Rio Grande. He's a cowboy.
God damn it.
Yeah, they punned Rio Grande with Rio Blast.
It's been a long time since I've seen or read. I just remember him being cool, and I had to look him up.
Yeah, no, he's totally the cowboy action figure.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, you're right. He was awesome.
He's just he's the classic cool. He's the guy that in any show would walk into a room and beat up 40 people and walk out fine.
Like I say, very much cowboy stereotype.
Yeah, exactly.
They played it well.
There's not much to it for me except he's kind of the Wolverine-esque type. He's a cowboy character. He's the Clint Eastwood, the John Wayne. He's that guy. And every good universe needs that guy, and he's that guy.
That's absolutely true. I almost want to say there was a bit of a John Wayne influence, like, intended on the figure. I may be totally making that up, but I think I remember reading that on like an IO9 article or something.
I could totally see
if I'm wrong, please feel free to hit me up on Twitter and tell me how wrong I am. That means we're getting Twitter. So.
Didn't he kind of have the oh my god, the chaps too in his pants?
Yes.
If I remember correctly. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
There you go.
Yeah.
I knew that. I remember some stuff. Can't say his name, but I remember dumb stuff like chaps.
It's okay. My number 8, very traditional, very classic, and honestly, almost did not make this list. My number 8 is Man-at-Arms.
Oh.
Yeah, and the reason he almost didn't make my list was his original action figure, his Wave 1 action figure, boring as shit. Came with a mace, weird orange armor, no mustache, and his cartoon character had the mustache. It was weird and wrong. And then I kind of thought about his role in the actual MOTU universe, and two things kind of stood out to me. One, he is one of the very few characters who actually has a name outside of the name of the figure and what he does. His name's Duncan. And that's even established in the original 1980s cartoon show, which is fucking cool because so few characters. I mean, you had Prince Adam and He-Man, but I mean, Teyla's Teyla, fucking Man-E Faces. His name's Man-E Faces. Yep. Merman is called Merman, but Man-at-Arms is Duncan. And not only that, but he's also an inventor. And it goes back to that whole, there's magic and science at the same time. Well, you've got magicians, you've got magic users, you've got spellcasters. He's the dude that builds shit. We wouldn't have Attack Tracks if Duncan didn't sit out in the fucking barn and build this awesome tank that ran over shit and had cool treads for feet or whatever it did. It had that weird flippy feet thing. I mean, that's all Man-at-Arms. And, he also was one of the few characters that had more than just a character type. I mean, he's not just the inventor. He's also one of the few people that Prince Adam shared his secret with. He is Teyla's father. He had a lot of character shit going on in a children's series where he wasn't the main character, and that's kind of cool.
Yeah, he was very close to making my list, but for the reason you said he didn't, just because he was a really cool character with a very poor design amongst other characters. Or not poor design, but a very bland design amongst other characters.
He is the second dullest action figure from the early line, and quite possibly the second dullest action figure. The dullest action figure is, of course, Teyla.
Yeah. Well, see, I'm going to complete reverse. My number 7, I thought, was one of, if not the most colorful, one of the most colorful figures, and one of the most bizarrely, not debuting ones, most just bizarre types of characters. My number 7 is Cyclone.
Yes! Oh my god, you're gonna find this hilarious in a second. Please continue.
Yeah, Cyclone, I mentioned being where he's just yellow, blue, red, bright on all of them. He had the ability to basically spin super fast and do whirlwind stuff. Mm-hmm. He stood out. I mean, like, not only a sore thumb, he is basically wearing what Batman wears in the Grant Morrison Zern Ross stuff. That's essentially what he's wearing.
Talk about the thing on his chest.
Oh, the original one? The
original one. He had this weird sticker thing.
He had the giant radar thing in his chest.
Yeah, it was a weird radar Doppler effect on his chest. It was great.
Yeah, and if I remember, even in like the 2002 show, he had it was smaller, but it was still there. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I think the original figure, if I remember right, had the giant. I mean, it took up almost his entire. I know it took up a lot of his stomach and chest, and was just a little radar. It essentially looked like in like Halo or Call of Duty, the HUD radar, but on his chest.
Yes, for whatever reason, because it would have been upside down to him were he to look down at his chest. It was absolutely ridiculous. Yeah, the blue and yellow color scheme with the red highlights, and then you spun him around and his arms stuck out and he swung around. It was glorious. So my number 7 is Cyclone. And I don't have much to say because we basically just covered it.
Well, see, we can continue this on because my number 6 is Zodac, who we talked about a little earlier. I think the only thing I could add, I like him because he's like, I don't know which came first, but he basically straight up the, oh my god, I forget him, the DC Comics character, from Apocalypse. Oh my god, his name's, it's part of the whole...
Orion?
Yes.
Yeah, he is basically Orion. He's also basically the Silver Surfer.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, which are all cool characters. So why would he not be there?
He is the Kirbyest character in a very Kirby-inspired line. I can't believe, again, I didn't bring that up when I was talking about him, but it's absolutely true. He is very much a Kirby
he's
type.
Sort of even just the way he fought, the way he talked, everything about him. Like you said, how he was introduced of originally maybe being a villain and then kind of either scrapping the idea or changing their mind. Mm-hmm. And then just being put into a million situations that character probably wasn't intended to be. Kind of lives up to the Kirby tradition.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, so that's my 6.
Very nice. My number 6 is, again, very traditional. My number 6 is Battle Cat.
Very nice.
Super awesome action figure. Loved the figure with the big saber-toothed tiger teeth and the armor you could take on and off. Those were really cool features. And again, I absolutely adored his character on the show. You know, Prince Adam was He-Man whether or not he was wearing the sword. The sword just gave him bigger muscles and a boom mic on his voice. But Cringer was legitimately a different character from when he was Battle Cat, and that was cool. That was a neat dichotomy. You had this character who was legit terrified of everything and didn't even want to be the crazy, stronger version of himself that he could be. Fuck that shit. He just wanted to go eat, some cat food and sleep under a tree. And that's cool. That was the reluctant hero trope. Again, being introduced to that at such a young age it's revolutionary. It's not something you really think of as a child. As a child, you think these guys are heroes because they're heroes. That's what they do. They've chosen to be the good guys. And Cringer was more like, no, fuck that. Until you changed him, he was like, yeah, okay, this is pretty great. But whenever you changed him back, he was like, yeah, this is who I want to be. I want to be the coward. I want to sleep under the bed. Please leave me alone.
The great images of him just shaking, terrified before a battle. You wouldn't have those.
Exactly.
Going straight from cats to I'm dropping that segue. I don't know where I was going with that, to be completely honest.
Nice try.
It was a good try. It was a horrible try. My number 5 is Stratos.
Really?
Yeah, mostly because that was my brother's favorite character, and he also he kind of had a basic design, but I thought it was kind of cool too. The arms coming out of his wrist, essentially, or his wings coming out of his wrist, essentially, and kind of being that weird combo of magic, science, and beast, where you didn't completely know what was him, what wasn't him, and I thought he was kind of a cool character that would fly around, kind of the Falcon, if you will.
Not bad. Okay, I'm going to be completely honest with you here.
Yeah.
I fucking hate Stratos. I think he's the lamest character, but I respect that, especially considering if he was your brother's favorite character. That's awesome. It's legitimately good to know that there are characters out there. Everyone is someone's favorite character, and that's awesome. I was just telling you before we recorded, there's a podcast out there where they literally spent an hour and 15 minutes talking about how Aquaman was the greatest character in this one girl's mind. That's her comic book character. She's collected almost every issue of the Aquaman series, going back to his original appearances in the 1940s. She loves Aquaman. That's fucking fantastic. Your brother, Stratos, is his favorite He-Man figure. That's awesome. Really? I personally think he's a joke. But I love the fact that he's somebody's favorite character. That just makes the world go around. That's fantastic.
The oddest thing to me is I didn't know until looking up for this list. Do you know what his original model was? What model he shared for his toy?
No, actually.
He was the Beastman and Mossman model.
That makes so much sense because his body was weirdly hairy. Yeah. Like the figure had wings, but his body was hairy, and again, that was just a weird dichotomy that my brain couldn't process as a child. And I think that was one of the reasons I actually didn't like him, was because I couldn't figure out why he had a hairy body but smooth arms and wings.
I will say this is almost entirely based off of the 2002 Stratos too.
Okay. Understandable. That's, again, extremely reasonable. Yeah,
because he does have his original line is, like you said, very odd. His 2002 one has a much sleeker design, and plus had that cool, almost like Native American loincloth of feathers thing.
Yeah, and that I did appreciate, because for a flying character, I thought they really went weirdly simian with his
Yeah.
original design, and again, that bothered me, and it still kind of bothers me to this day, because I don't know what they were trying to say with that.
I don't either, but nonetheless, there he was.
Yeah. My number 5. Weirdly, I don't think He-Man is the most interesting hero in the Masters of the Universe line, unlike Skeletor, who is, in my opinion, the best villain. So my number 5 is actually He-Man. And a lot of the reason he's on here, he is a good barbarian archetype. He solves most of his problems by hitting them. He's got a cool magic sword, but again, there are other characters who are more interesting to me than He-Man, but the reason I really did like him, one of the first He-Man figures I got was the Battle Damage He-Man, which instead of wearing the weird bandolier, he actually had a full, plate armor, still sleeveless, but plate armor breastplate, and it had a symbol on it, and if you flicked it, it would turn once, and then that symbol had a slash on it, and if you flicked it again, it had 2 deep grooves on it, he'd been into some serious shit. And Skeletor actually had one too, and they were really fun to play with, because you could literally have them beat scars and scratches into each other. You could make it look like they were really going at it and really having a tussle. And then, of course, at the end of it, you'd reset it back to the original setting, and it would, you'd have a pristine He-Man again. So you could make it look like your figures had been through the shit without actually damaging or hurting your figures. So that was a cool toy, and I really remember having a lot of fun with that, and I really liked it. Also, his sword and Skeletor's sword were built so that they would form together and form a complete power sword, which was a neat little effect. It's pretty bog standard for the 2 figures, but I thought it was cool. So, yeah, He-Man, not the best hero in his line, but good enough for me to put him on my list.
Well, it's cool. I think 2002, one of their re-releases of the figures. I think I probably have it somewhere, because I know it was Nathan had it and I had the Beastman one. But the sword it came with, the one that it came with was the 2 swords that would form together to make his. Just an updated version of it.
Yeah.
Well, actually,
yeah, and they clasped together instead of just just pushing the buttons into the holes from the original line. They literally had a clasp, and the 2 hilts formed guards for each other depending on the hero or villain holding it. And yeah, that sword was fucking cool.
It's pretty awesome. Well, my number 4 is actually very similar. Is She-Ra.
Nice.
His twin, in pretty much every way, character, everything. Despite the battle figure stuff, saying a very similar reason, I always thought it was cool to have a character, the most masculine kids figure there was, and the most male driven, to have a complete series that was a female driven version in every way. And in my head, that always showed that weird line that people draw between the sexes, how imaginary that line is, knowing you can take the exact same characters and just flip them and then work the same way, basically.
That's a beautiful sentiment. I'm down. I like that.
And that's essentially why she was there. And plus, I always like women that kick ass, and she was just like He-Man in the way she just kicked a lot of ass because she was protecting what she thought needed protecting.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm down. That's excellent. My number 4 is a little kind of similar. My number 4 is actually the Sorceress.
Oh, I remember her.
Yeah, totally. Unfortunately, her figure came out far enough down the line that I think they didn't produce as many of her as they did a lot of the other figures, so I never actually owned her figure, but I've seen it, and it's gorgeous. It's a really good sculpt. The way they did the feather cape that she wears is just really, really neat. The bird headdress she has. I actually had the falcon that she turns into. I had that figure. I don't know if it came with the Grayskull playset or if it came separate, but I had that one. But the actual Sorceress figure itself was just really well done. And then in the cartoon, I just thought she was really cool. She was, we talk about the magic of the world, and she was very much the center of the magic of good in this world. He-Man was not the center of magic. He-Man was a tool of Grayskull and Grayskull's representative, the Sorceress. And she had this really baller design. The feathers and the one piece, that the open legs, but it was definitely a one-piece suit, the headdress, the staff. She was just she spoke of witchery in a good way. She was a good witch. She was the good witch of this line, and it's awesome. It's a great design. And she was a cool character to boot, but she looked amazing. Much like basically the rest of my list is characters that I think were A, awesome looking, and B, fun to play with as a kid. So I genuinely wish she is the one figure that I regret not having had a chance to pick up when I was a kid, because I think she was just fucking awesome. Number 4, the Sorceress.
I don't know if you've seen it. It was one of the new releases that line. I think Mattel did it, where they were just meant for collectors, and they were the statues. And hers was awesome. It was like the ancient Egyptian redo of her.
Yeah, which was cool.
I'm a sucker for ancient Egyptian stuff, and I want that one extremely bad. If I can ever find it, I will buy it.
I would love to see it if you do. Again, that was one I totally missed. They put out those statue figures after I stopped collecting the new line of toys too. I actually didn't even get the Snake Men figures because, again, the line had already more or less been canceled, so they were released in a much lower quantity, and they were just hard to find, and I kind of gave up at that point.
Yeah, that's a weird thing with the figures line. I mean, they're still a big deal to collectors today, but they release them on such a weird basis.
Mm-hmm.
Of them and
they make the weirdest ones.
Yeah, well, I just looked up while we're looking at who I talked about earlier. Provis is having I think it's his first or second figure release this year as part of their classic redone line.
Mm-hmm.
And it just says sometime 2015. It's the first big figure and big release he's had, but no other information. It's just okay. It's coming out this year.
Well, good luck, man. I hope you can get one if you want one.
It'd be cool. I would get them. Stepping away from that and figures, someone else who I don't know if he's had a figure actually. My number 3, in a world of very black and white characters, is very good and evil. He was someone that was kind of gray, and someone I'm putting him on the good list because he's been, even though he looks like a villain, he's been aligned good more that I can find than bad. And my number 3 is Lord Dactus.
You're going to have to be more specific. That's a name I don't recognize.
He was the king of the, Spilleans? He was a friend of King Randor. Once again, kind of one of the classic universe characters before the main ones. He was they were like the bat-like things.
Okay.
He was a big opponent of like King Hiss. And Skeletor.
Okay, yeah, again, that's kind of further into the 2002 show than I think I've gotten. I vaguely remember seeing that design. Man, I really should have boned up on my 2002 show before we did this podcast.
Oh, that's fine. But anyway, yeah, he just looked evil. Had like a blue wing, a black wing, kind of red and black. Looked like a villain, but with a good guy. And in this universe, that's very unique because normally the bad guys look like bad guys, good guys look like good guys for the most part. Mm-hmm. He was someone that was, like I said, the majority of the time he was looking out for his people, but he was almost always aligned with the heroic side, if not always in the show, and I think a little bit elsewhere he was kind of bad, but only for his people. But he looked like a straight villain. He looked like he should have been, another Skeletor, Hordak, someone like that. He should have been that, but instead he became this just really, really powerful good guy, and his design is awesome.
That is super cool. I like it. I gotta say, my top 3, I'm not 100% if this is my final top 3. I'll read them to you in the order that I wrote them down. But honestly, these 3 could change places at any given time. I think any one of these guys could catch me on a different day, and I'll tell you, one of the other ones is number 1 than the one that makes it. They are pretty interchangeable for me. I love all 3 of them dearly.
I think it's a good and bad of any top 10 list. Normally when you get to the top 5, they're always like that. Whatever the day is, whatever I've read or in the mood for, they'll be number 1 now.
Yeah. So my number 3, fuck all the haters. My number 3 is Orko.
Orko. Oh, don't worry, he almost made my list.
almost made your list.
Hey.
He's again, that character design is badass. You have no idea what that fucker looks like under that robe.
Nope.
He's got the robe and the hat, and all you know is he's got blue fingers and blue ears.
Yep.
That's cool. I don't know if this is just a creation of the 2002 series, or if it's something they addressed in the 80 series. I honestly can't remember. But I love the idea of he's not a shitty magician. It's that his wand got broken. Yeah. So he has no way to control the magic that he's using. And that's neat. That's cool. Both of his figures are the one that came out for the 80s, where he had the little zip tie that you zipped and he would zzz across the room, so he had little wheels on his on his robe. And then the one that came out for the 2002, where he very clearly has, like, you know, his knees are kind of propped up because he's casting magic while floating, and his base is this great wash of water that's going to shoot out a ball of energy that he's casting, and it's super dynamic and cool. And that's my Orko. My Orko is this neat, dynamic, cool, mysterious figure who, sure, he cracks jokes, and he's definitely the court jester, and that's his initial role. But I think it's also kind of important to point out he's, you know, there's three people who know He-Man's identity. He-Man, well, Battle Cat, Man-at-Arms, and Orko. There's a reason Prince Adam and He-Man trust Orko with that information. And it's because Orko is loyal as hell. He's a great character. He believes in the cause. So, yeah, I adore Orko. He's, you know, everybody hates Snarf. Everybody hates Orko. Everybody hates the weird sidekick character. And if we made a Thundercats list, honestly, Snarf would be in my top 10 too. But, yeah, Orko is so much better than people give him credit for. And his figures were always neat and different from what you got with the rest of the figures. He's not based on a different sculpt. You can't. He's so unique and original. That's the only, you know, they made his mold, and that's what you make. You make Orko figures with it. That's cool. So, anyway, TLDR, I love Orko.
That's okay. There's enough love for Orko. I don't think he's a bad guy. Like you said, a lot of sidekick characters get a bad rep. And it's kind of just inherent to that position, and sometimes I know why. Other times like that, don't really know why, because for a character like He-Man, you need an offset of some kind, and I think that works relatively well. It kind of made the show have this endearing charm that people still go back and watch it for, even if it's just to watch, oh my god, look how crazy and weird and corny this is. A lot of that relevance is because of that character.
Absolutely. I absolutely agree.
Well, going from one of the most known, I'm going to one of the least known for my number 2. He is a character that debuted, I believe, in a mini comic. I think, I want to say it's called like Magic Thief or Magic Stealer, something like that. And my number 2 is Procrustes. I'm going to explain it to you.
I'm sure I read that.
He is a character that, he is a god who holds eternity together with his arms. He has like 4 arms. Holds it together. In that mini comic, Skeletor uses a siphon to take up all the magic of Eternia that brings him to the surface, and it's essentially He-Man convincing him to go back under, having to try to fight him to go back underground because Eternia is falling apart without him.
I have read that one. It's awesome. I didn't know the name of the character, but that is a really, really good one.
And I know He-Man fought him, but I'm putting him as a hero because he's a god who holds the Eternity together, and of course with Magic Siphon he was slightly influenced, but still I love that level of like Greek mythology inside of the He-Man universe, because once again you have magic, you have science, but then to know at the core of this planet, this place, this land, there is a literal person holding it together.
Yeah, that's what he does. It's Atlas level.
Yeah, and I always loved the imagery. I thought it was cool. He had 1 or 2 characters or 1 or 2 figures, and they were kind of, some people don't like them because they're very bland, because the figures look like they're made of a dirt character, but his name is also Procrustes.
Yeah.
And he's from the center of this place. He's going to be rather dirty. I'm fine with that.
Right.
I'm fine with that. I think he's a cool character that I would love to see do more with. More done with.
Do you remember what figure that comic came with?
Ooh, no. I wonder if I can look it up.
Because I'm dead curious. This is a total aside, just to satisfy my curiosity.
I found it on Wikipedia. Let's see. The Magic Stealer is a second series Masters of the Universe mini-comic produced by DC Comics, written by Gary Kahn. The artwork was drawn by Mark Texeira, inked by Todd Smith.
Yeah!
It was packaged with action figures of Mechanic, Skeletor, and He-Man.
Okay, that explains why I've read it.
Yeah.
Definitely.
I'm sure one of those you probably got. Two of them I know you got.
Yeah. Well, the third one you'll be interested to know in a minute. It's funny that you mentioned Mark Texeira, because one of the reasons my number two is because his comic was also drawn by Mark Texeira. Do you remember who Mark Texeira is?
No.
He was a big Marvel artist in the 1990s, most known for Ghost Rider.
That's why I don't know.
He drew a fuck ton of Danny Ketch Ghost Rider, and he was kind of a big Midnight Suns Marvel horror artist, mostly in the 90s, but he still gets work today, and some of his earliest comic work was doing Masters of the Universe mini-comics back in the 80s. But yeah, he's actually, you may also know him, he at least opened the Christopher Priest Black Panther run for the Marvel Knights Joe Quesada imprint back in 1999 with the same run that introduced Kevin Smith's Daredevil.
Okay, yeah, I did. Wow, okay, I didn't know that.
Yeah, same dude. Yeah, and he also drew the first mini-comic for Ram Man, who is my number two. And a lot of the reason is because Mark Texeira did the art for the mini-comic, and it was glorious. It's really very good for a throwaway mini-comic that came along with an action figure. Also, Ram Man was an incredibly stiff figure. I mean, obviously, the way he's built, he can't turn his head. You could barely move his arms, but he had the springy thing going on with his legs, which, of course, again, you couldn't move, you couldn't bend the knees, and you couldn't separate the legs, but he kind of sprung along, and you could definitely use that action feature in playtime. And in the cartoon, he was always played as kind of a dumbass, but he had an axe, and he hit things with his head, and clearly the cartoon was kind of giving you the idea that he basically had a permanent concussion, so he was always kind of goofy. In my own personal headcanon, he was basically, Man-at-Arms' second-hand or right-hand man, like his general. He was the guy that, because he was the only other Eternian soldier that we really got to see beyond Man-at-Arms and to a certain extent Teyla.
Yeah, I mean,
he was really the most prominent soldier. That was what he did. He was a soldier in the Eternian Army, one of the best soldiers apparently, because we constantly got to see cool shit that he did. So I always kind of thought of him as this super hyper competent general who, when the going gets tough, would just literally headbutt anything that got in his way because he had shit to do. So yeah, again, cool figure design, squat. Once again, another character who you really couldn't use his model for any other character because it was so distinct. It wasn't with the helmet and the lack of the neck. You really couldn't use that for a big other line of characters. You built Ram Man models. You use those to create Ram Mans, and that's cool. He was very, very distinct. Again, in a world of distinct-looking characters because you couldn't swap his body out for somebody else's. So I love Ram Man. He's my number two.
Okay, I like the reason. I like it. My number one is kind of an obvious choice. It's the obvious choice. You talked earlier about how He-Man was kind of bland, and he kind of is. But at the end of the day, I had to put He-Man at number one just for the sole fact of him being not only the star and the center of attention, but how much the universe revolves around him and how much amazing events would not happen with or without him. So He-Man is my number one. I know it's a bland choice and that choice, but it's also the kind of the basic tale of a kid that wants more, finds more, and takes up the responsibility to protect this giant land.
That's true. He definitely puts with great power comes great responsibility to the ultimate paragon. Yeah. Just like Superman, he will always do the best he can to do the right thing. He doesn't give up. He doesn't stop trying. He always wants to be. He is the hero's hero.
Yeah, he's a Superman. He's the John Cena. He's a whatever you're watching. He is that archetype. But he's also one of, not the early ones, but also one of the early big ones for a lot of the pop culture people we have today. He is a lot of you go back to. I mean, he's a very influential one, and he is still relevant today, even without a show or even without a comic that runs off and on, he is still somehow relevant, which is a very hard and odd feat to do.
Yeah, absolutely. That's 100% true. And I really appreciate that choice. Like I say, in my personal opinion, I do not think he's the most interesting character in his own universe, but that's not to say he's not an interesting character. And that's like, I'm a huge fan of Superman, but I know a lot of people aren't, because it is kind of boring to be the Boy Scout that always tries to do the right thing. But that's important, and that's an important character aspect, and it's good to have that character in your fictional fantasy narrative. And I absolutely appreciate his placement on your list. He ranked a little lower on mine, but that's no problem. That's nothing.
I think, really quick, what I was going to say is just, you mentioned Superman. I think what really made me love characters like Superman and He-Man and any character like that to an extent is really, I mentioned all the freaking time. It made my top list on favorite comics, but it was Joe Kelly, Whatever Happened to Truth, Justice, and the American Way, Superman versus the Elite, essentially.
Yes,
that whole line, the whole story arc of him being like, it'd be so easy for me to snap, it'd be so easy for me to become this person I would hate. I could do it, and I could do it well. It's much harder for me to do this and fight it every day, but I do that to protect everybody, not just you, not just me. Mm-hmm. And I always like characters that do that, because that is a much harder choice to do, is to be the Boy Scout and to always do the best you can. So I somewhat admire characters like that.
Absolutely, and I agree. Looking at my list, like I say, if you caught me on a different day, my number 3 might be my number 1. And yeah, when I wrote this list, my number 1 was definitely my number 1. Today, I think Orko would actually be my number 1, but I don't. That doesn't mean that to knock my current number 1 choice. It's a very esoteric choice, especially in light of your pick for He-Man. My number 1 choice is Mechanic.
Although very relevant of Procrustes, so okay.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm saying. I fucking love Mechanic. He was one of my early favorite toys, period. Right up there with Trapjaw. You turned his waist, and his mechanical neck, which was literally built and painted to look like circuitry, would raise up, and he's basically a periscope. And he had this cool, weird, like, pyramids on his helmet and the big Plastic Man style goggles, which, now come to think of it, may be why I love the figure so much, because for some reason, and I legit could not tell you why, I have always loved figures with crazy eyewear. It's a reason I love Cyclops. It's one of the reasons I love Cyclops so much. It's one of the reasons I love Geordie LaForge so much. I'm pretty sure I've mentioned it on here before, but weird, crazy eyewear, I am a fan. And he had these weird pyramid goggle style, like I said, like Plastic Man glasses, and he came with a big ass club. And it kind of goes back to what we were saying earlier. It's this weird world of magic and technology, and Triclops will come at you with a sword, and fucking Mechanic will bash your head in with a club that's got some spikes on it. And I don't know, it's this weird. But he's got the fur boots, because he was based on the He-Man sculpt. So he's got the fur boots and the wrist things that are supposed to be armor, and the furry Superman underwear over his blue, must be spandex or swimmers something body, because he had the human the Caucasian flesh-colored, that sounds terrible, the Caucasian flesh-colored hands and face.
You're going like long pig territory or something, it sounds like.
Yeah, I know, I am an earth meat human. I don't know what you're talking about.
No, I know. Well, that's something so odd about all the Masters Universe characters. It's very hard to know what they look like what's them and what's not them. Where do they end and their suit begins on all of them.
Right. Exactly, and it's like I said with Trapjaw, you kind of get the feeling that dude may just have a blue body and a green face, and we just kind of have to accept that. Yeah. But yeah, Mechanic, I have such fond memories of just twisting that dude's waist and making him look slightly higher than any of the other characters. Because it was maybe 2 inches of neck. It's not like in the 2002 reboot cartoon where his neck was fucking MC Eschering all over the place.
Yeah.
But I I adore his figure, and he may or may not have also been in the Eternian military, at which point he's ranked at least as high as Ram Man under Man-at-Arms for, again, having actually a figure and a character made. I honestly can't remember, but I adored his figure. I still adore his figure. I have very, very fond memories of playing with his toy as a child. So, yeah, again, Mechanic, Ram Man, and Orko. Put those three in any order, and I will probably point to it and be like, "Yeah, those are my three favorite MOTU figures." Then you shake it up and put them in the order again, and I'll be like, "Yeah, those are my three favorite MOTU figures." So, but yeah, just the strong nostalgic ties to those figures and seeing them in the cartoons. I just have such a close relationship and close feelings towards those characters and those figures that I love all three of them. And yeah, today, or the day I wrote the list anyway, Mechanic was the very number one tippy top of that list. And now that I've talked about it a little bit, I'm still okay with it. Mechanic is number one. Mechanic, Ram Man, Orko, 1, 2, and 3. I'm okay with that.
I like it. That was a solid. I think solid list. I think we got, even through our weird way, we got a lot of the characters people love, a lot of random weird ones, but I think that's
I'm so surprised Cyclone showed up on both of our lists.
Me
that
too.
was great.
There's a few that are. I'm kind of shocked we're on both, but I'm happy.
Yeah. I'm going to go through my runners up real quick.
Go through.
Okay. Buzz-Off, who was a legit cool figure, but Zodac basically had the same headwear and he wore it better. Manny Faces almost made this list. He was on the list for a long time, but hot damn, Roboto had cooler special crap. So just barely kicked him off. Fisto, fuck you, fuck everybody. I know what Fisto means, but that big ass metal hand was neat. And when you were 3 or 4 years old and it was a figure that just punched the shit out of other figures, perfect. I'm down. And Stratos, who was a robot horse, his figure didn't move. The legs were locked in place. Everything was locked in place. But he was actually meant as a vehicle accessory because you could put a figure in him and move him around. But I love Stratos because he was introduced. His character, the actual robot horse, was introduced in an episode written by J. Michael Straczynski.
Oh, I did not know that.
No shit.
Oh my gosh. That's what we're just proving. Masters Universe is just a fertile ground for artists to kind of start their career.
You know who else wrote for Masters of the Universe?
Who?
Paul Dini.
Jokingly, I was going to say that as just a joke.
Absolutely true. He did 2 episodes. He has absolutely no memory of them. He has no particular fondness for the Masters of the Universe. It was literally a paycheck, but he did write a couple episodes for He-Man.
The more I think about, what major really cool cartoon has he not had something to do with?
I don't think he had anything to do with the X-Men cartoon from the 1990s. Yeah. Oh, he was too busy on Batman the Animated Series. I was about to say, he had a pretty good excuse, though. Yeah, exactly.
I cannot believe that I was jokingly going to say Paul Dini just because of Batman and Clerks and stuff, and I was like, oh, he probably did it. He does everything.
Yeah, no, yes, it was Paul Dini. That was my trivia for the day.
Oh, God damn it! Oh, it would have been so. Here's a quick question: out of any comics creator, who would you want to have written? Yeah, who would you want to at the time have written a Masters of the Universe episode in their current incarnation at that time?
Steve Gerber.
Really? Okay, this would be there are 2 that I go straight for. Okay. I'm surprised that you didn't say Morrison.
I wasn't thinking. I was thinking of people who would actually have written for Filmation in this.
No, I'm thinking of
in the 80s.
I'm thinking anyone that was writing at that time.
Oh, just in general.
Yeah.
Because I was thinking writers who could have done the crossover. I still actually think I would go with Steve Gerber, just because he actually when he retired from Marvel, he did do animation, and he always had these weirdly humanist stories. You remember who Steve Gerber is, right?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, for those in the audience who may not have a clear idea of who Steve Gerber is, the shorthand version is he did a lot of stuff, but he created Howard the Duck. He had such a humanist tilt on his crazy fantasy stories that I really would have loved to see him take on, like we said, this universe where everybody's basically got crazy powers, and your hero is the super upright, moral Superman type character, and your villain is one of the best examples of pure evil in fiction. And take that down to a humanist level and play with those characters in that kinky, not sex kinky, but just odd.
Yeah.
Steve Gerber way. Same thing with Steve Englehart. He had a very similar. He didn't take it to the extremes that Gerber did. But Englehart had a really good, enjoyable way of playing with tropes and ideas, and also he really liked to tie continuities together to make them fit. So if he'd given a rat's ass about Masters of the Universe and really wanted to do some fill in some continuity gaps or kind of make the show make a little bit more sense, I think he would have done an amazing job. So my first pick, Steve Gerber, Steve Englehart being a close second.
I'm going to do two. My first one, I'm going to put it out there because we just mentioned him, but we haven't, and he would have meant a really interesting would have been Grant Morrison, just because at that time in particular, it would have been the most subversive, weirdest episode amongst a bunch of weird episodes.
Yes, very much so. And I think that's an excellent choice.
It would have been, Neil Gaiman would be the actual choice. I think would have made something extremely interesting at that point in his career.
What was he doing in the early 1980s?
This is where it's
that early. It's not because
it would have been. That's why I think it would have been interesting because it would have been something before he had released any known work.
Right.
So it would have been a very early Gaiman. So you could have it would have fit the show very well because it would have been the show, but with the Gaiman isms coming out at an early age, so it'd be it wouldn't be over. It wouldn't be straight up Sandman Gaiman or Coraline. It would have been a very untested.
It would have been proto Gaiman.
Exactly. So I think it would have worked. Or you were talking about fertile ground. That would have been a cool ground to see what early concepts in his head.
Right. And that's actually the big reason I did not immediately go with Jack Kirby, because it is such a Kirby-inspired world. I feel like there's not much that Kirby would have been able to contribute to it. It's already tropes and ideas and themes that he'd been playing with.
Ooh, and if we could do an unedited episode, Miller or Moore would have been the choice.
Ooh, yeah.
Just because, speaking earlier of like Rio Blast or something like that, Miller with that, we would have got the most,
that would have been brilliant and brutal.
At that point in time, too, it would actually been smart Miller and crazy, weird, out there stuff, or Moore would have been the same way on the, man, we need to go back in time.
There are so many things I want to go back in time for that are just the smallest, littlest, nerdiest things. Like, there's a part of me that would just like to live in 1982 for just that year, just be there and actually buy the comics that were coming out as they were coming out on the stands, go to the theaters and see the movies that were coming out in the theaters at that time, and just experience the culture as it was happening, as opposed to the nostalgia of the culture as it is now. Because 1982 is one of the single best years for movies, and quite possibly the best year for science fiction and fantasy. That's the year that, just to give an example, Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan, and Blade Runner both came out. Also, E.T.
Didn't Last Starfighter, or was that later? 87.
I don't know, but I wouldn't be surprised. Basically,
a summer
any number of amazing science fiction and fantasy films came out in '82. It was a real I was going to say well-stoned, but I think it's what the word I'm looking for is just, it was a well of creativity. Before we sign off, I did want to touch very briefly, been talking about toys literally all episode.
Oh my God. Really quick, I just looked up a list of just to see what it was, because I know that I've heard a lot. So, 82, Blade Runner, The Thing, E.T., Wrath of Khan, Tron, Poltergeist, Dark Crystal, Forbidden World, Swamp Thing.
Which was not a terrible movie. It was 2/3 of a good movie.
So on those alone, that's incredible.
I'm telling you, man, 82 is well known as one of the best years for science fiction films. Period.
I've heard a lot of people talk about that. It's weird looking at a list where they're all right there.
Yeah, that was what you got to deal with as a science fiction fantasy fan in 1982, and I really would. There were like just a few things, entirely selfish things that I would do as if I were a time traveler. I would go back to Roswell in 1947 or 4. I can never remember, but it's July 2nd, 1947. I want to say I would go see what happened. I would buy the first issue of X-Men off the racks, and I would basically spend a year living in 1982.
Yeah, but see, mine would just all be all musical stuff and be kind of generic stuff.
Totally reasonable.
To be completely honest.
So yeah, I wanted to touch very briefly on some of the cool vehicles and playsets that came with the figures. Yes. Number 5, I just did a list of 5 on this one. Number 5 was the attack track, which I mentioned earlier. It was a tank, but the tank treads actually, flopped and moved, and it made a sound, and it was cool. It was neat. What we had, it took them forever to put out the weird green and orange fly-y contraption that I cannot remember what they called, but that thing that they actually used in the cartoon, that didn't come out as a toy forever. So what you had instead was your attack track. So you basically drove He-Man everywhere in the attack track, which was awesome. Number 4 was the Bash Asaurus, which my friend Kenny once so eloquently described, and I'm going to try and probably fail to quote, so it's more of a paraphrase of how he described Bash Asaurus, but it was basically the perfect toy for young boys in that it was a tank that was also a dinosaur, but that also the dinosaur's tail had a big ball, like a wrecking ball on the end of it, and he drove it, the ball would smash down in front of the figure over and over and over. If they had only somehow managed to make a ninja version of it.
Yeah, I'm looking at a picture right now. That is crazy.
Yes, it's so fucking cool. The Bash Asaurus was probably the best vehicle, and on my list it's definitely the best vehicle because the other 3 are playsets. Number 3 is the Castle Grayskull playset. It was awesome. You can tell Nathan it was great, and I wish I still had mine. My number 2, I beg you guys, this is one of the reasons I want a website, because if we had a website, I would put up the link on YouTube to this. You can actually watch the 30-second commercial for the Fright Zone playset on YouTube, and watching that commercial, oh my god, you guys, the feels I got from watching that, because it's a much smaller playset than either Castle Grayskull or Snake Mountain, but it's like 2 levels, 2 very small levels. On the top, there's a gnarled tree that you can use to grab figures, and on the bottom, there is a hole where you can have a snake puppet that actually fit on your hand, and you would stick it through the hole, and you could like bite at action figures and have the action figures fight this giant snake that was also you, and it was so fucking groovy. I love the hell out of that toy. The only thing better than the Fright Zone, my number 1 choice for playset, fucking Snake Mountain. Skeletor's base, Snake Mountain, was fantastic. It was all pinks and purples. The color scheme was great. The mountains all had faces in them, and the best part was that it came with a microphone that had a toggle switch that would make your voice get all boomy and crazy and weird, and you could totally use that to scare your young cousin and make her run away while you're trying to play with your He-Man figures. That's a story from personal experience. But yeah, just everything about it, it was huge for one. It was bigger than Castle Grayskull. You could fit more figures in it, you could do more with it with those figures, and it had such neat accessories to it, and I mean, I have fonder memories of Snake Mountain than I do the sewer playset for Ninja Turtles, the Technodrome. I never played with the G.I. Joe aircraft carrier, but I don't really care about G.I. Joe, so, I don't care how big it was.
Yeah.
Fucking Snake Mountain. The playset. And it was just, it was balls awesome. And I want to say it was like a $50, $60 playset in like 1983, 1984. God knows what it'd run for now, probably $200 or $300. And yeah, it was worth it. It was awesome. So many great childhood memories.
See, that's awesome. Toys, I always go back and forth on collecting and loving, but there's always just something fun about playing, of course, about playing with toys. and I know everyone's always like, oh, the toys were better in their era because nostalgia. 80s have had some awesome stuff. But the He-Man stuff in particular was just fun and bombastic, crazy stuff.
And I think that's a good coda. He-Man was fun, bombastic, crazy, weird, different. There really wasn't another show like it on TV. I mean, Thundercats really tried to capture some of that magic, and maybe even succeeded in capturing a bit of it. But He-Man really stands alone as this weird barbarian slash technological marvel slash world of magic, and it somehow manages to make all these wildly disparate elements coexist in such a legitimately smart way. I was going to say smart, but I feel like I have to defend that. It was a children's cartoon, but like I said, there were parts of He-Man that made me curious about technology. There were parts of He-Man that made me curious about art. It made me curious about design. It made me think as a kid, and that's not nothing.
No, that's very important. That's something that a lot of kids don't get, and it's He-Man. If anything, we've talked about it, there's been a lot of people that were highly influenced by it. That's one reason I want to talk about it, because it's a show that had a show in Toyland that somehow influenced a lot of very creative people. It's still, whether it be for comedy or for serious sake, has still influenced a lot of things for whatever reason. There's just something about that universe that was that grabbed people and wouldn't let them go. And it's stuff that we don't. Today I can't think of. There's not a show on like it today, but it's also you just can't have a show on like that again today. Like the 2002 one was a very different show. If they relaunched it again, it'd be very different. I'd be interested if they relaunched it again. It'd be kind of cool.
Well, last I heard, they finally had a script and a director they liked for a Masters of the Universe film, which they've been trying to do forever. And I think, for better or for worse, the success of the most recent Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles film may have fast-tracked He-Man as a property. So, we'll see. Hopefully it will be legitimately good, as opposed to Ninja Turtles, which is a terrible film that I just happen to enjoy. I would like a legitimately good film. We didn't really talk about the live-action Masters of the Universe film. Have you seen it?
Yeah, but if they're making a new one, I want to point out, I've on Twitter and I think the last podcast or something said I desperately want a Ryan Gosling, Jared Leto, Masters of the Universe movie. Can we get it?
I can't really argue that.
I want it.
Those are interesting choices. I doubt those are the choices they'd ultimately go with, but that would definitely be a different, interesting film.
Young Hercules and Joker should be the top two choices for that film. I'm sorry. And plus, I'd love those two to death. So
I just want a Courtney Cox cameo.
You want one cameo of Courtney Cox if they can get?
Yeah, if she's like in a crowd or something somewhere, and you just see her face, kind of like the weird Omar cameo in the Edward Norton Incredible Hulk movie. Even if it's just that, I think that would be lovely. But yeah, give me real Orko. Fuck Wildor. I want Orko.
That's the one part of that movie that there's some weird stuff, a lot of weird stuff in that movie, but that is one that definitely bugs me. Is you have a character that already fits that design and kind of the almost purpose they had. It's a very weird choice to just be like, oh, let's do this.
Well, on the director's commentary, and yes, I've listened to the director's commentary on the Masters of the Universe movie, the director acknowledges that was supposed to be Orko. They did not have the budget for an Orko. They had to do the best, they did the best with what they had. Also, one thing I did want to mention about the movie that I totally forgot when I was talking about the Man-at-Arms and his placement on my list, the moment that actually super secured Man-at-Arms for me as a good character and one that I loved is from the live-action film. When our heroes first land on Earth, they basically have to scrounge for food, and they find a discarded bucket of KFC. And when Teyla first finds out that they're eating animal flesh, she gets really bothered by it. She's disturbed. She's not happy. And Man-at-Arms is just chomping away. Not because he's this weird carnivore, but because he's the consummate soldier. They're in a weird world. They need sustenance. This is sustenance. He's going to eat it. He needs to eat to keep his strength up to be who and what he needs to be. It's he's a soldier, and I thought that was such a neat moment and such a great bit of character work in a film again, for a secondary character in a film that does not really concentrate on them at all, it was just a neat little bit that I loved and has always stuck with me ever since I saw it in the theater. And yes, I saw the Masters of the Universe live action film in the theater. I was 5.
Oh, okay, that's okay.
I'm an old man. For those of you who did not realize the age discrepancy between Colby and myself.
This would be the next. This may be the episode of focusing most on that. Next to maybe the Monday episode.
Right. Yeah.
That was brought up a little bit, but dude, we need to do one that doesn't completely. That doesn't. Well, I was gonna say one that wouldn't work, but I like having a weird list like this. It's not. I love doing comic stuff, but it's kind of cool to do an offshoot every now and then. What I'm curious if fans like this. If anyone out there likes this, what else would you like to see us do a weird list of?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, and please also just give us some feedback. Let us know who your favorite weird, esoteric Masters of the Universe character are. Tell Colby he's wrong about Trapjaw. Tell me I'm wrong about putting He-Man so low.
That's right.
We want to hear from you guys. If you guys have any opinions on this episode, or if you want to hear us talk about something in particular, again, find us on Twitter. That is easily the best way to get a hold of us. We are both on Twitter all the time. I am, again, at Voodoo Ben.
I'm at Hellhound F5.
Or you can email us if you have more than 144 characters to say. We are blah blah podcast, that's all one word, at gmail.com.
Yeah, I mean, seriously, you want to know what we think the top 10 sci-fi movies are, anime, cartoon, 80s cartoons, pro wrestlers. What do you want to know? We can do it.
Totally, and if we can't do it, we will respectfully decline on air, and we'll read your email.
Nope, I'm going to fake it.
And I guess that's pretty much it for this episode. We should be back next week. Might be doing something special. Might just be doing the usual comic stuff. It's kind of funny. You know, you think, considering we've gotten really pretty good about putting these out on a regular basis, we would actually plan them out more. But no, it's really just something we kind of text each other a couple of days beforehand and are like, hey, what do you want to talk about? Yeah. So a little peek inside the blah blah podcast curtain.
Well, you say that this episode did have a bit of research. The planning for this started immediately after the last episode.
Yeah, which was cool. Maybe we should probably do that more often.
Yeah, who knows? Maybe we should. But yeah, thank you guys again for listening and downloading. Like, subscribe, wherever you're listening to us. Talk to us. Tell us what you like. Tell us what you hate.
And I have not said this yet. I've kind of been mum on this, but I'm going to go ahead and, if you can, if you feel like it, if you want to, give us a rating on iTunes. Yep. All the podcasts I listen to say that really does help other listeners find the show. If you like us, just let us know and say it on there. We'd really appreciate it.
We would. It would be awesome. And once again, let us know where you're getting it from. Let us know that you're there so we can focus on the markets that we feel we're strongest in, because I'll still put stuff out on everything, but we can definitely focus more, whether it be on iTunes, Podomatic, SoundCloud, YouTube, whatever. Wherever you want us, we will be there, but we will start focusing more on wherever we are strongest at.
Absolutely. I think that's a good idea. And on that note, goodbye, everybody.
Bye. He-Man, I have the power.